be honest, you guys. Part of the reason yesterday's video went up a little late was because I was up till 1 a.m. playing with the kendama instead of editing. Shout out to Adam22. That's a day one kendama around the world. I'm really going places with this thing. Today's probably going to be kind of a chill day. I just want to take it easy. I've been running around a lot for the last 2 weeks with reversal here, which has been great, honestly. It's been a lot of fun. But there are a lot of things that I need to catch up on, like laundry and kendama practice. So the plan today is to sit down, do some math, and figure out who the actual new best defenders are. But there's also a couple level 4 raids starting. That one's down at the Pike in, what, 20, 30 minutes? Also not too far away later on. So I'll probably head out for those, but for the most part, we're doing math today. Some kind of movie shoot going on. Anyway, I'm headed down to the Pike. That level 4 raid egg hatched, and it's a Blastoise. Okay, this whole raid portion of the video turned out to be pretty long and doesn't actually add to what I'm trying to accomplish with this video, but I covered some important points and I'm going to save it for tomorrow so we can go into detail on some things that need to be improved with the raid system. Now, let's get to the defenders. Alright, maybe that'll be tomorrow's new trick. So I did the math, and this math is a little different than previous best defender spreadsheets, and that's because of one crucial change that Niantic decided to make for whatever reason, and that is that Pokemon 3000 CP and above lose CP. Their decay rate is 10% per hour in a gym, as opposed to Pokemon 2999 and below, who only lose CP or motivation at 1% per hour. So that effectively discourages you from placing your strongest Pokemon in gyms, especially in gyms that you're not going to be able to get back to regularly feed berries to, gyms in low traffic areas where your teammates might not be there to feed berries. And I mentioned it briefly yesterday, but I think there are better ways of discouraging people from putting the same high CP Pokemon in gyms. And honestly, one of those is to get rid of CP altogether, because as of now, the only purpose that CP is serving is to let you know that Pokemon above 3000 are going to lose CP or motivation faster in gyms. If Niantic would just show each Pokemon's base stats on their summary page instead of this aggregated CP number, people might choose defenders based on their actual defensive stats, which is largely how this list ends up being ranked. So with that ridiculous decision in mind, I'm going to give you 2 different sets of rankings here. One is just overall rankings, and really that hasn't changed since before the gym update, but the second ranking is going to be based on maxing your Pokemon out at just below 3000 CP. So taking into account all the Pokemon who max out above 3000 CP, I did calculations to figure out what their maximum possible CP is without going over 3000, and then did their ranking calculations based on whatever level it is that they end up to be under 3000 CP. I'm just going to go over the overall rankings really quickly because this is pretty much exactly the same as we've seen before. You have Blissey at the top with almost all of its movesets, Snorlax with Zen Headbutt Hyper Beam, Dragonite with Dragon Tail Outrage, Dragonite, Exeggutor, Rhydon, Tyranitar, Dragonite, Rhydon, Snorlax, Lapras, Snorlax, Ampharos, and remember, these rankings are based on completely maxed out Pokemon, level 40 with perfect IVs. I'm going to put a link to this spreadsheet in the description, which also has offensive and dueling rankings, which are updated for the stab changes, since stab and super effective bonuses changed. Keep in mind, this spreadsheet can't calculate for if one move is super effective and the other's not. So in a lot of cases, when you're looking at one specific Pokemon, let's say Rhydon, and it has Mud Slap or Rock Smash as potential quick moves, you have to sort of do the math in your head really quickly for cases where one move might be super effective and the other isn't. So for example, right here, Mud Slap's DPS is 8.57 damage per second. Rock Smash's DPS is 7.69 damage per second. But if you're going up against a Pokemon with a weakness to fighting and not ground, for example, a normal type like Snorlax, then Rock Smash is going to deal 1.4 times its normal damage. And you can kind of factor that in, and in that case, Rock Smash is actually going to deal more DPS against Snorlax. So essentially, in practice, what you'd be doing is multiplying Rock Smash's DPS by 1.4 to get its super effective DPS. And keep in mind, this DPS listed here is offensive DPS because there's really no point in calculating super effective for defensive DPS because you don't get to choose which Pokemon your defender is going up against. So that's it for this spreadsheet. That one, again, is linked in the description. But now we're going to jump over to this one, which is the less than 3,000 CP defender rankings for the gym update. That is a giant fly. Anyway, here they are. So again, what I did for these was figure out, for all the Pokemon who max out above 3,000 CP, what level they need to be to come in under 3,000 CP. So Tyranitar, for example, has the highest CP out of any currently available Pokemon, but in order to come in at below 3,000 CP with perfect IVs, Tyranitar needs to be level 28.5. So all of Tyranitar's calculations are based on a level 28.5 Tyranitar. Same goes for Dragonite, a level 29.5, and all the other Pokemon who come in at above 3,000 CP, all their calculations are done with that 3,000 CP cap in mind. Now, if gym turnover is high in your area anyway, you might just want to choose your Pokemon based on the other best defenders list. But if you're placing Pokemon in a gym where you want to keep them in there as long as possible, this is the list you should be basing your choices off of. So here we go. The best defender under 3,000 CP in Pokemon Go as of right now is Exeggutor with Confusion and Solar Beam. And Confusion is a legacy move. Exeggutor doesn't have Confusion as one of its possible moves anymore, so if you have a high IV Exeggutor that knows Confusion, you might want to invest some TMs into getting Solar Beam as its charge move. And just as a note, since we're on the subject, any moveset that appears in italics includes a legacy move. Obviously, it doesn't tell you which of the moves is legacy, but you can just go onto a site like GamePress. I'll link to that. Also, maybe I should explain how these rankings are calculated. These rankings are calculated using a Pokemon's defensive DPS multiplied by its tankiness, which is its defense and HP stats multiplied together. So that gives you an idea of how much damage the Pokemon deals on defense and how many hits the Pokemon can take before fainting. And again, for Pokemon that max out above 3,000, these are calculated based on their sub 3,000 level. So second overall is Blissey with Zen Headbutt and Hyper Beam, and its ranking compared to Exeggutor is 93.5, which means it's about 6.5% less efficient as a defender than Exeggutor with Confusion and Solar Beam. Third and fourth are Lapras with Ice Shard and either Blizzard or Ice Beam, and Ice Shard is a legacy move, so even though I was pretty bummed that almost all of my good Laprases have Ice Shard and not Frost Breath, I can at least change some of them to attackers, and I can keep a lot of Ice Shard Lapras for defenders. After that, we have Ampharos with Volt Switch and Zap Cannon, which is about 91% as efficient as the best Exeggutor. Then you have Blissey with Zen Headbutt and Dazzling Gleam, Exeggutor with Extra Sensory, which is still an available move, and Solar Beam, Lapras with Frost Breath, Ice Beam, Ampharos with Volt Switch, Focus Blast, more Lapras. Then you have Golem with Mud Slap, Ancient Power, legacy moves, Lapras with Frost Breath, Hydro Pump, Jolteon with Volt Switch and Thunderbolt. And you might be surprised to see Jolteon here because it has relatively low defensive stats, but the reason it's here is because Volt Switch really is that good of a defensive move. It has some of the highest base damage for any quick move, and moves with high base damage are better on defense because they don't suffer as much from the long cooldown time that gets added to a Pokemon's attacks as a defender. Next up, we have more Exeggutors, Confusion Psychic, Zen Headbutt Solar Beam, Ampharos with Volt Switch Thunder, Exeggutor with Bullet Seed Solar Beam, Golem, Exeggutor, then Flareon with Fire Spin Overheat. Interesting to see a fire type this high up in the defensive rankings now. After that, more new Pokemon, Alakazam with Confusion Future Sight, Slowking with Confusion Blizzard, Lapras, Frost Breath, Dragon Pulse, more Slowking, Golem, Jolteon, Slowbro with Confusion Psychic, which actually has the exact same stats as Slowking with Confusion and Psychic, Porygon 2 with Hidden Power, and Hyper Beam, and that's probably calculated based on a normal type hidden power for stab. But the interesting thing to note here is that we haven't seen any of the previous high CP defenders aside from Blissey, and that shows just how much they've really been damaged or hurt in these rankings by having to come in at below 3000 CP. If we continue down, we see even more new Pokemon: Charizard, Heracross, Steelix. It's good to see Steelix in there because Steelix is one of the better defensive Pokemon in the game, stats-wise. Muck, Poliwrath, Machamp even. So I'm not going to go read the entire list to you because that would be an incredibly boring video. But again, the link for this is in the description. You can go check it out. Check out all these new defensive rankings for Pokemon 3000 CP and under. Pokemon under 3000 CP. All in all, it's an interesting new metagame that we're playing in right now. This 3000 CP disadvantage has really changed a lot for gym defenders. Now there's also a lot more to consider, like you only get coins when your Pokemon get kicked out of gyms, so sometimes you might not even want your Pokemon to stay in gyms that long so that they can get kicked out and come back to you and you can earn your coins. There are also other things to consider, like a maxed out Tyranitar or Dragonite will still outperform a maxed out Jolteon as a defender at full CP, but as it goes down over time, that Jolteon is going to gain an advantage. Now, if you're in an area where your team can constantly feed berries and keep your Tyranitar or Dragonite or Gyarados or any other high CP Pokemon fully motivated and maxed out, then they're going to be better defenders. But if no one's feeding berries to your Pokemon, they're going to decay quickly and soon be outclassed by some of the lower CP Pokemon. I should also add that my calculations are done differently than a lot of other people's calculations, but the list still comes out fairly similar. There are some slight variations, but they're not going to make a huge difference. If you go through the Showing Work tab and notice any glaring errors in the math that I've done, please let me know, and I would be happy to update and make sure everyone gets proper information. With all that said though, it's kind of a confusing new time for defenders in Pokemon Go, and as time goes on, if any new strategies come out and rise to the top, I'll be sure to update and let you guys know. But for now, my honest advice is in areas like Long Beach, where there's pretty high turnover, you might as well just put your favorite Pokemon in the gym and take a screenshot while it looks cool, because it only takes 3 battles to completely knock a Pokemon out of a gym, and regardless of if it's a Blissey or a Pinsir, it's going to get done eventually. So you might as well have fun with it. Boom! Finally. I can go eat dinner now.